Hello, everybody. Welcome to Uncle Sam's Club. And of course, you know why we're here. We're going to be tracking Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States. He is actually the only Indian Prime Minister to visit the United States and address the joint session of Congress for the second time. The only Prime Minister, and amongst a few notables like Nelson Mandela, Winston Churchill, and that's pretty good company if you think about it. But thank you so much for joining us. Of course, Prime Minister Modi at the present time is part of the yoga event that's going on at the United Nations headquarters, which he led. And we are now joined by Sreemoy Talukdar. Of course, you all know him, senior journalist, senior executive editor, right? That's the
No,
designation.
I'm the
With first
deputy executive editor. No, the deputy executive
deputy
editor. Yeah.
deputy executive editor sounds like pretty heavy duty
Well,
stuff.
Bengali.
well, I'm.
Bengali.
I can assure you that I'm doing the same thing that I've been doing. There's no change there.
Okay. And of course, you know Pallavi Ghosh, who is here with us in the
Hi.
car as usual.
Oh,
Yes.
sound like
Why
Suhel
you
now.
sign?
You sound like
Okay.
Suhel.
Oh, I sound like Suhel. Oh God. Suhel and Abhijit will be joining us. I would tell you all where Abhijit is at this present time, but I'm too much of a lady, so I'm not going to do that.
Mm,
Srimoy, let's just start with you. And you have really been like, putting out the columns and you closely observe. In fact, I think you're one of the finest observers of foreign relations and geopolitical wrestling that goes on. And you break it down really well for the layperson. So I just want you to tell us about why this trip is important. Is it important? Prime Minister Modi is, of course, one of the longest serving elected heads of state in the world, if not the longest. So how important is this visit?
I think this. I think this trip is the real deal, in the sense that if you look at Mr. Modi's previous visits to the United States, he has met three presidents: Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and also Biden. And all those trips were designated as working lunches, and which were below the actual in terms of protocol, below the status which has been accorded now. But if you look at what has happened, and I wrote this in a piece today, that for a person who was once denied visa to go to the United States
Mhm.
through a little-known American law for almost a decade, now the Americans have rolled out the red carpet for him like they do it for no other. In fact, Biden, in his tenure as the president, has only invited three state leaders on a state visit so far. One is the French president, Emmanuel Macron. Then the other one is the South Korean president. And then the other one, of course, is our Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. So that tells you the kind of importance that the Biden administration is according to this visit. And not just that, I mean, if you look at the stated schedule of Mr. Modi in the US, it includes, apart from obviously the state dinner, which will be hosted by the POTUS and First Lady, there's also a private dinner with the Bidens, which something which the Bidens wouldn't have. I mean, this is not part of the protocol. So protocol didn't demand the US president to actually call him for state dinner, but of calling for a private dinner, but he has done that. And then he's been put up at the Blair House, which is just across the White House. And then he'll of course address the US joint session of the US Congress. And then he has also made the top CEO. So the Americans are according him the probably the highest level of hospitality that the American state can master, and they're doing it for a reason. And this is the reason that I want to come to. I
Yes,
think that
that's what I want
I
to know.
think yes, I think that what has happened over the years, and this is the thrust of my piece as well, that the place where you in India and United States are at right now in terms of their bilateral ties, this is the pinnacle of their strategic alignment. This is what the past presidents and prime ministers have worked for, and I think this the credit for this goes to both the Biden administration and of course the Modi government for having the strategic vision to take forward a relationship that could have fallen foul to a lot of pitfalls along the way. But they did not do it. They kept steadfast on strengthening their ties, and the result is evident. Very ironically, I should not say ironically, very coincidentally, the day Modi is in Washington, Biden at
Mm.
a private fundraiser called Xi a dictator, and it prompted a very angry response from China. And this is just
Hmm.
after Blinken had gone to Beijing and had a meeting with Xi just to put up a guard lane in the relationship. So that tells you the trajectory of the ties in terms of how the United sees India and how United States sees India and how the United States sees China. And I think this is this visit that you are seeing right now and what you will see unfold over the next couple of days is the greatest expression of strategic alignment as well as goodwill in bilateral ties that you can see from both India and United States. Countries that are not allies, countries that are not allies, they are not treaty allies, but they are bound together in more ways than one. So, so what I would say that this is the real deal.
This is the real deal. Pallavi, you've of course had a long career in journalism, and you've seen a lot of these state visits where
Makes me
Indian prime.
sound old. Yeah.
Well,
I began early, by the way, Sreemoy, just in case you get
okay,
this
she
impression
began
I'm old.
early.
Like I was 16 when I became a journalist.
Oh, is it?
Wow, that's child labor. Who hired you at 16? Let's start a campaign.
Okay, go ahead. Advaita Gora is with us.
I'm just ignoring that. But Pallavi, you've seen a lot of Indian prime ministers, of course, go to the US. You've seen American presidents come to India. You've seen the interaction. Is it different now?
In terms of the American interaction with the Prime Minister. So,
Yeah,
I
the way the
just to make the
Americans are like
point with,
rolling out the
yeah.
red carpet and all of that.
So, just to take the point which Shima was also making is that this was a Prime Minister who was never ever given a visa as long as he was a chief minister, and there's documentary evidence also to prove that it was seen as a kind of a political witch hunt and deliberate on the part of the UPA government, because this is the kind of feedback they gave to the Americans. So I still remember the first time the Prime Minister went there. I think there's a kind of a gawkiness on both the sides. The Americans because of the history, and him also because of the history. And I guess, it is like this when you go there the first time, the media is watching you and you're wondering how you're going to kind of, get over the past, so to say. But, and here was a man who was not a diplomat or a bureaucrat like, say, Dr. Manmohan Singh was. He was right from a seen perceptionally seen as a small town boy or man rather, who was a chai wala. All of those reasons where he won with a huge mandate in one of the largest democracy in the world. So I think I still remember the first picture of him. He was wearing a bandgala and all that. No attempts of trying to project himself as westernized, because I remember that was a pressure on him. Speaking in Hindi, insisting that he speaks in the local language, which is Hindi, and so on and so forth. I think that gawkiness which I noticed in him as a journalist, I think in his first visit, the first few days, that has completely been removed. I mean, he looks very comfortable. They look very comfortable. I mean, I know there are people who criticized him for the Donald Trump, Abki Baar Trump Sarkar and all that. But, and I was there, I remember during that time when that particular event took place. The crowd was very much organic, and it
Were
was
you in the
actually
US?
very impromptu.
You
Sorry?
were in the US that time, or
Yeah,
were you
that
in the
point of
US?
time. Yeah. Trump
Oh,
wala to
okay.
time to US mein tha na. And
Oh, they did.
then
You didn't go this time.
I didn't what?
Haven't been
Sorry.
gone this time, clearly.
No, this time I haven't gone. We take turns in going. And
Oh,
so, even in Munich, where I went the last time round, I noticed that the crowds are becoming increasingly organic. People were actually happy to see, and many of the people I spoke to actually identified. Like many of the people who are working in America at that point of time, the crowd who came there, they didn't know how to speak very good English, and they were not very white collar jobs. Many of them were those blue collar jobs, and somehow he synced in with that crowd. And over the years, I see one, of course, the fact that India, and I think the Prime Minister's statement this time round is like, I really loved the last line of his interview, where he said that I present the country as we are and myself as I am. I think that has been the hallmark really of what his trips abroad, particularly to America, is all about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a kind of
I love that
confidence.
line. I really
Yeah,
love that line.
it's a great line. It's a great line. Abhijit,
Yeah.
I mean, let's just dive a little bit back into history and the kind of condescension that the prime minister has had to face in his interactions, with especially the American, because I think our elites have such, some of them at least, have such a chip on the shoulder when it comes to Americans and the white skin. Remember, at that point of time, they were saying things like, "Oh, how is he calling the American president by his first name? What is he going on about Barack? And they made such a big deal about the fact that he called a man who was his counterpart in another country, younger than him in age, by his first name. And suddenly that was this massive issue.
So, it was an issue for the Americans. I know this for a fact. The Americans didn't appreciate it. And they were the ones who leaked the fact that he had that the suit, that the Bandgala had Narendra Modi monogrammed on it. Remember, that was the visit when he called
Correct.
Barack Obama Barack. And within a few hours, it leaked that somebody took the close up shot. And it was the American side that leaked it because nobody was close enough to him to see that particular monogramming except Barack Obama himself.
So you think
And
Obama was upset
I
that
don't
he called him by his first
I
name?
don't think I know. I know for a fact it was Barack Obama himself who leaked it. And Barack Obama had a huge problem with him being called by his first name. He did not want to get on a first name basis with Modi. Because he has his own liberal cabal. I mean, all the damage that is being done under Trump and Biden by the Democrats, it was all nurtured and fostered and fed by Barack Obama, who came off smelling of roses, but he created this sort of time bomb which exploded after he left. So what ends up happening is, I know for a fact it was Barack Obama who tipped off his staff because there were a lot of clips from that visit which never went public, especially where after this whole Barack Obama episode, one of the staff members apparently says something weird to him, and Barack Obama looks at Modi and does this kind of a thing. I don't know why, because there were a lot of feeds covering it at that time. I don't know why they didn't. But Barack Obama has a lot of derision for Modi. When part two of his biography comes out, you'll actually see that derision come through. And this is why I never endorsed the BJP supporting all the nasty things he had to say about Rahul Gandhi, because when part two comes out and Modi comes into the picture, it isn't going to be very nice. Let's be very clear about that. Barack Obama had the issue. Barack Obama is the one that leaked the Narendra Modi monogrammed Bandgala to the press. Think about it even logically. He was the only one close enough to Modi for long enough to have been able to see that monogram. Though I have lots of sources that told me exactly what happened with all of that. But anyway, and multiple sourced, by the way, not single source. So, you're muted, Advaita.
Tell us now.
Well, lots of them. I mean,
Ek bata
mostly
do.
on the American side.
Right. Kahan ja rahe?
Not the Indian side, because you can't really trust the Indian side with anything. But so that's pretty much what happened out there. Barack Obama had to keep it in check. He had a great condescension for Modi. He had to keep it in check because there were much larger institutional and national issues involved out there. So he did. As opposed to Trump and Modi, who actually kind of got along. And look, the derision from the Indian side comes from a lot of different things. They can't deal with the fact that an OBC man has become prime minister. And not just that, an OBC man also keeps thrashing Janaudhari Brahmins in elections every single election. Okay, 52 elections, 53 elections and running. He keeps thrashing the Janaudhari Brahmins. So there is an element of casteism at work. There is an element of, the insider thing at work. Oh, look at us. We speak English so fluently. We can quote Schopenhauer and Nietzsche.
Exactly.
And, we can recite Goethe in the original German. We can quote large passages from Turgenev in the original Russian. We can, if we go to America, we can charm the socks off the president by, singing out Henry Longfellow's Hiawatha, etc., etc. And look at this fellow. He, a little pipsqueak from the middle of nowhere, comes after selling tea in a platform. How dare he upstage us? How dare he make us look like idiots? So this sort of classist attitude also permeates, because remember, the upper classes everywhere tend to have an affinity with the upper classes everywhere else. So notice they will not criticize Imran Khan or whoever the upper classes in Pakistan are supporting, because the American upper classes tend to fillet the Pakistani upper classes, who then tend to reverse fillet the American upper classes. And because the upper classes here were all in cahoots with the regime ancien out here, you see the same thing. So whoever the upper class here criticizes, or in Pakistan criticizes, will be criticized by the Washington Post and New York Times, because it's essentially, it's turned into a rich auntie's Sunday kitty party club. There's a absolutely dumb woman called Meera Kamdar. I would really urge you to go back in the ORF archives and listen to the speech she gave at ORF. We were actually stunned at how particularly dumb she was and how she ended up in the ORF board. Not in the ORF board, sorry. She was invited to ORF to give a speech about this thing, about the New York Times, because she was in the New York Times as editorial board.
Yes, she was at the NYT editorial board. Yeah, she has blocked me on Twitter.
She is the most clueless creature you will ever come across. I would urge you to just Google her on YouTube and things and listen to her. Her claim to fame is she apparently has an Indian ancestor and she plays reverse swing jazz. All she is a rich auntie. She can't have a conversation beyond a recipe for Coca-Cola braised ham, or a vegetarian quiche. But this is the New York Times editorial board. You look at this lady, Karen Athiya, who's taken over, what is it, Washington Post, Sreemoy, or NYT?
Yeah,
Karen
Washington
Athiya.
Post
Not sure. Not sure.
Washington Post opinions.
She's an ORF Raisina fellow. She came here for the Raisina dialogues. Everybody knew her to be dumb then. Everybody knows her to be dumb now. She's an affirmative action clown. The person in charge of the US Embassy, till Eric Garcetti came, was an affirmative action clown. The lady had never held any managerial position. There have been complaint after complaint after complaint against her in the US diplomatic cable system. It was just sheer dumb luck that she climbed up the thing, because you tick some boxes even if you don't have the competence, you're put up there. And she was the one that would be promoting news laundry and things like that on the US Embassy Twitter handle, and she would only hang out with leftists that have a certain point of view and things like that. And she was allowed to run hopscotch because there was no ambassador.
This is irrelevant. Let's
No,
move
it is
back.
very relevant. It is very relevant because you need to understand how low-class people like this US Embassy second in charge, who are easily manipulable, who need social validation, will suck up to people who provide social validation here. It's essentially it's essentially a validation brothel that's run out here. The social climbers and the social climbed. And in order to social climb, you need the validation from the social climber. Right? So it's a very simple system.
Yeah, so let me just AIM seems to, okay, he's back. AIM and Sreemoy, let's get back to you. What are the big ticket decisions that we can expect from this visit?
I think those have been talked about pretty openly. In fact, I was surprised by some of the leaks that happened from the Indian side about the jet engine deal, because it seems to me that the US side was not very keen on leaking the details. But there was a report in Indian Express which said that about 80% of TOT we can expect on the GE jet engine deal, even though the 20% that has been left out probably will be the most important part. Can you just give me 1 sec? I just need to switch the AC on. Just give me one moment. I'll be right back.
So, AIM, do you
I,
want to come in here?
I
Since
think to
defense is
finish
your beat.
Sreemoy's thought,
Really do
I know
agree with
for a
AIM
fact.
completely on this, Advaita, on this whole mindset, this classist mindset. That's what I was talking about. So his predecessor was Dr. Manmohan Singh, suave, former, diplomat, and not a diplomat, bureaucrat, English
Technocrat, yeah.
speaking, and the entire contingent of Dr. Manmohan Singh, English speaking, even the journalists going along that way. And here comes a man with a huge, huge margin of victory, and he insisted on speaking in Hindi for that matter. So the crowd may have loved it because it was a desi crowd, but clearly the Americans were not very comfortable. कहीं ना कहीं उनके दिमाग में ये भी था, like, oh my God, who is he? And why should we need to listen? This Gora versus dark thing. I found that very obvious in the first, I would say, the first visit of his. By the time the second, third, he kept on proving himself, he kept on having his own ideas. Then they realized that this is a man we need to do business with.
But also, I think for them as well, to have somebody who they denied a visa to, in fact, the law has only been used to deny a visa to Prime Minister Modi, to come to power in the largest democracy in the world with a thumping majority. It's their nightmare. Because how are you going to walk back on something so insulting and so condescending with
No, I think
someone
here,
who's, I mean,
if
that I think the onus was really on him, and I think the prime minister was gracious. If you ask me, he was very
I
gracious in the way he dealt with them.
if I can take this up, I think Pallavi made a great point. There was a lot of gawkiness during Modi's first visit because I think the kind of uneasiness was there. Uneasiness was mutual. I think Modi clearly also lacked in confidence because he had a point to prove, and also the Americans were embarrassed because now they had to invite someone who's the Prime Minister of India, having denied a visa to him once. But I think we have moved on from there. And while I agree with Abhijit that Obama didn't particularly was personally probably not fond of Mr. Modi. But the fact is that as a senator, Obama once suggested that he put up a observer at the UN for Kashmir. But when he was the president, he actually walked back that, and he actually prevented Holbrooke from hyphenating India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan and in one desk. So the institution or the permanent establishment in Washington, I think that ultimately prevailed. And even though Obama, he might not have any personal liking for Modi, but then the fact remains that under the Obama regime, the US also came out with the Asia Pacific policy, which is, you can say that it is a precursor of the Indo Pacific policy, where they were pivoting to Asia. And the China challenge was just rearing its head. And they were just discovering the fact that India could be probably their biggest counterweight to China, and it's also a democracy. So these realizations came during the Obama regime. The car was steered in a certain direction, you might say, during that time. So even though the US president, and this is part of the piece which I wrote today, that even though the US president personally, one US president personally, might not have a great liking for one prime minister, but the institutional, I think the momentum prevailed, and the fact that the two countries were on the course to become probably the allies, the greatest alliance system without being an ally, the kind of state that we are now in here. Where the Washington, where the Bidens are rolling out the red carpet, which they have done only for two treaty allies before. This point in the relationship has been reached through a certain course in history, and Obama was also part of that course. Another point which I wanted, I think that's not very relevant to what we are having a discussion on the Modi's visit to the US, but I think this point needs to be said. I think the division which is there in a certain section of Indians towards Modi, I agree with Abhijit completely that it is totally classist. I remember one journalist, I don't want to take his name, but when Mr. Modi became the prime minister, he was wondering pretty loudly that how can a provincial fellow from one corner of Gujarat can go on a foreign tour and hold his own with the statesmen and the diplomats. So that I think division is pretty open, and that division has persisted. And it is probably to their charge in that Mr. Modi has proven them all wrong, and he's turned out to be a quite effective communicator even in foreign policy.
You're muted.
You're muted.
AM, I want to get back to what Sreemoy was saying about that jet engine deal. Why do
Hmm.
you think it was leaked by the Indian side and not, what's the story behind that?
So the leaks have been that we're getting all the technology and this and that. We
Hmm.
know for a fact that the crucial technology, which is the crystal blade engine, is not up for being given. Okay. Now, it is being leaked because nobody wants to come on the record and say we are getting the crystal blades, because that will be dissed immediately once it is made official. But if it is sources, the Indians can always say, oh, well, we didn't say it officially. It's some sources within this thing saying it. So, it's what the Americans are giving us in the G414. What is on the table today was on the table 8 years back, and it was on the table 10 years back. It was on the table in the last 2 years of Manmohan Singh's government. It was on the table in the first 5 years of Narendra Modi's government, and it has been on the table in the current 5 years of Narendra Modi's government. Okay, there has been nothing new. There has been no change in the American posture. Crystal blade technology is simply not up for transfer. Quote unquote, that requires a completely different level of cooperation. Now, for anybody with half a mind to think that America is going to give us something that it has not given much closer allies like Canada, like Australia, like even Sweden, with whom they have massive industrial cooperation, industrial technological military cooperation, not given Israel, they are going to give this to India based on what? Okay. I have it on the record from the Pentagon that it is not being given. Okay. Now, they want you to believe, and this is why it is all source based. Notice no Indian official, every Indian official is willing to call up my boss and tell my boss, Abhijit is wrong, tell him to take down that tweet. Not one of them is willing to actually call me up and tell me that. Not one of them is willing to come on the record and saying we're getting 80% of the technology by value. We're getting about 20 to 30% of the technology by value, 78% in terms of manufacturing efficiency, and the real value, which is the crystal blades, we are not getting. Okay. So, and it's not like we don't manufacture crystal blades. Crystal blades are quite easy to manufacture. You can, in fact, if you go do a YouTube search, you will see how you can grow crystals at home. Okay. It's very simple. You can do it with an alkaline solution and sugar. You can grow crystals at home. The question is getting a thing that tough, that is not brittle and strong enough to resist thousands and thousands of degrees of Celsius worth of heat for a very long time. It is not going to be given to India. Nobody wants to come on the record on it because they want this entire story to be spun that this is somehow a landmark visit, which it is not.
Yeah, but the American commentators, I've been watching them, they have been dangling this whole thing of, is India the next Sweden? You know, they have been
Mm.
sort of dropping that tantalizing treat, so to speak.
So, the thing about being the next Sweden is we made this mistake when they started up with this values based system. Now, remember, a socialist Scandinavia dictates what is democracy.
Hmm.
Okay. When I was growing up, democracy was simply having multi party elections in which everybody could vote. Today, democracy involves me having less water in my glass than Sreemoy equals a Brahminical fascistic imposition by Sreemoy against my democratic rights and crushing me by the state because the Scandinavians has decided this to be so. Having a punitive justice system and not a rehabilitative justice system is apparently a human rights violation and is undemocratic. Everything under the sun today is undemocratic. Tomorrow they'll say sun tanning is undemocratic. Tomorrow, washing instead of toilet papering your bum is undemocratic. This is the stage at which democracy's definition is being expanded today. Okay. So now you tell me, opposition channels in this country, who is funding them? Nobody wants to fund them because they don't have viewership. You look at the two biggest English channels, Times Now and Republic, they have 80% of the market. Advertiser dega bhi to kya
No,
go.
CNN News 18.
News 18 and also India Today. And even there, you look at the strata, people much prefer nationalist programming. So the nationalist programming segment is almost 90%.
Yeah,
The
but on
market is
YouTube, it's
for
like,
money. Right. So what ends up happening here is quite problematic. Them having 10% of the market but not getting funding is fascistic and undemocratic. Okay. Even though in Scandinavia you have extremely nebulous hate speech laws which can lead you to do anything. Do you remember the Indian kid in Norway who was taken away for being fed by hand by his mother? But that is apparently totally democratic. So these definitions of democracy, they keep varying them. And they have decided what is a democracy, what is not a democracy, and things like that. What can you do in this particular case? See, we should have never made that mistake of falling in. For I wrote about it very harshly. People told me you shouldn't have said this about Jaishankar and Modi. I said this values-based bullshit is going to come back to bite you because you neither have the intellectual sophistication nor the academic heft. In India, no institution gets money for research. You get money for doing events. There is no primary research done by a single institution in India on the humanities. It is all events and tamasha and five-star parties. You neither have the academic depth nor the intellectual sophistication to counter that argument and become a Sweden, which is neither here nor there. It is understood to be in the Western camp, but it is officially neutral. This should have technically been the thing. We should have never fallen for this values-based bullshit. We did. And now it will be used to hang us by. And there's nothing we can do about it because they've fallen for it. Our leaders got carried away and said, oh, yeah, we're also values-based. We are not values-based. We are a strictly interest-based alliance. Today, let me tell you what American values are. And I want our viewers to decide if any of these are Indian values. Okay? Is racism an Indian value? Is telling a majority that you're a sick, disgusting people, to kick you out of everything, to make you feel sorry for being a majority, and then make you accept every crime that you've committed and not committed, be thankless for your standard of life. Is that an Indian value? Is telling a child who is even remotely curious about cross-dressing, who may not even be gay, to tell them that they are in the wrong body, to give them hormone blockers and puberty blockers, without telling their parents to go in for genital mutilation, which will destroy them for the rest of their life? Is that an Indian value? Is sending pedophiles to school and indoctrinating your children, actually providing demonstrations of sexual acts between adults and children, is that an Indian value? On what of these are we values based? We are not pedophiles. We are not racists. We are not child molesters and sexual deviants. These are American values today. This is apparently the state of democracy today. We do not go around bombing other countries and regime changing them. We do not kill millions in the name of democracy and cackle like the demoness from hell and say, I bet you I care more about Iraqi children than Saddam Hussein does. Thankfully, that woman contracted cancer and died a slow, horrible, painful death. I hope she's rotting in the lowest levels of hell reserved for demon born like that, Madeleine Albright. I hope she's rotting in the lowest levels of hell reserved for people like her. I hope the rest of her family joins her like that. These are not Indian values. India and America do not share values.
Well,
there is one common interest we have, China, and that is it.
Sreemoy, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just, I think that was a fine speech by Abhijit, but I think no one takes the values bit seriously. I mean, it's more like the elephant.
Yeah.
You have a set of teeth. Yeah, you have a set of teeth to show to the world and a set of teeth to eat. So that's different. I think you should see what the countries are doing, and that is where the actual point lies. I mean, it doesn't matter what you say. If I were to take a topical example, Blinken went to Beijing and he said a lot of nice things there, and then when he returned, Biden went to a fundraiser and said that she's a dictator, and now it's all back to square one again. So you can keep saying a lot of things that doesn't really matter. What matters is what you're doing. And I think in terms of what you were doing, I think that is also the Indian strategic culture. We like to keep things ambiguous. We will never, and this across, I think this is across regimes. This happened during the UPA regime. This is happening during the NDA regime. The permanent bureaucracy, they believe in ambiguity. You might call it strategic ambiguity, but they'll not come out clearly in favor of this or favor of that. But you'll have to decipher in between the lines by their actions where Indian interests lie. For instance, you can now realize that India is slowly moving towards getting more defense acquisitions from America compared to that of Russia. I think even though they will publicly say that no, Russia is still our state fast friend, that might be true. But the fact is that the defense industries are slowly getting more integrated towards the American system. That is the action. They might say a lot of things, but that is where the action lies. So I think nobody takes these values bit seriously, even not even the Americans. And even the chattering classes in both countries, they like to say a lot of things. If you look closely at the Biden administration and the Modi government, you will find that they mostly steer clear of the noises. I remember one press conference, I think John Kirby attended that, when there was this NPR journalist who wanted to ask a few questions about the state of Indian democracy and stuff like that. And Kirby said to her that, you'll find India is a very robust democracy. I think that it so happened that they had to defend Modi's state visit, so they came out on that side. Otherwise, they might not have given that particular answer. But that is what it means in the end. It is all a matter of posing. But to
Yeah.
come back to
Yeah.
your question about what are the deals that we may expect from this, I think obviously the Jet Indian deal has been spoken a lot about, and I would slightly disagree with Abhijit here. I know that he has a very good point, but I'd slightly disagree with him. I think that the Biden administration is breaking a lot of China in pushing the deal through. And it's the problem is that it is not always the administration that can do everything. If you look at the civil nuclear deal, which ultimately didn't bear any fruit, but at that point of time in 2005, the Bush administration did have to move heaven on earth, did have to do a lot of spade work in getting the bureaucracy, in getting the Congress move. And they did do a lot of work. Right now, also, I can see a shade of that being happening. I think that the export control regulations that are there in place, which are a legacy of the Cold War, where the US has put in place a certain system where the technology that they value the most do not go into the hands that they feel are the wrong hands. I think the entire system is geared up in a way that those export control systems prevent these technologies being imparted. But I think from that point of view, if you look at what the Biden administration is actually doing, it is trying to push through a deal which has a component which has, I'm not saying that the most important component is going to be transferred. I'm not saying that. But there's an element of component which is getting transferred. And to do even that, the Biden administration is having to do a lot of spade work. And I think we should appreciate that. There is also the fact that we are buying some Reaper drones. So that is just a government to government deal. And I'm sure a few lot more MOUs will come up. But what has struck me more interestingly is that the groundwork of this visit has been happening for the last 6 months. And there has been a lot of visits by the bureaucracies from both sides in each other's countries to sort of sort out and thrash out a lot of areas where there could be potential pitfalls. I think that effort has been evident this time. And I think more than a talk shop, we might see some substantial deals. That's my understanding of the situation.
Okay, thanks so much, and welcome, Suhel Seth. Looking very happy to join us today. What are your views on the U.S. Visit of Prime Minister Modi?
I think it's great. I think the haters hate everything. You see, half of India has a problem for every solution. The Congress, particularly. If you give them a solution, they'll say, but this is the problem. This is not Narendra Modi's state visit. It is the state visit by an Indian Prime Minister representing the Indian people, of which we are part, A. B. It's a moment of celebration for India that we have been invited and treated with respect. Some idiots on Twitter are comparing Nehru's visit and Indira Gandhi's visit. The comparisons are not only odious, but they are irrelevant. I can invite Advaita Kala home, give her dinner, and still not respect her. How does that matter? Today, you're seeing a different level of respect, not for Narendra Modi, but for India, for brand India. So that's, to my mind, the important thing. People are stupid in our country to not recognize that this is not an ordinary state visit. It may have the same kind of dinner. You may have to wear the same black tie. You might be served the same crappy food. But the recognition of India at in the Committee of Nations at the high table has never happened. Number two, you may hate Modi. Don't transfer the visceral hatred you have for Narendra Modi, the man, to visceral hatred for everything that's going good for India. We have become our own worst enemies. We see a dark lining on every silver cloud. I mean, for no rhyme or reason. The point is, the man has gone as a representative of the people. He's an elected member. I mean, he's an elected prime minister. He's not someone, who's sneaked through the back door. And it's also not his business or job to go to Khan Market in Delhi looking for an opposition every morning. Cut the man some slack. Who knew about yoga? For years, you tell me, for years, all the IP that India used to create went abroad, including Darjeeling tea. Do you know in Texas there's a rice category called Texmati? We even got rid of Basmati. The point I'm making is today you have the opportunity to stand tall. You are equal. You are not, to my mind, the India of yore. Now you saw the declassified comments, some of the documents. Some of these idiots who are putting on Twitter don't even realize everything. What did the American establishment say about Nehru and Indira Gandhi's eating habits? When these documents of this state visit are declassified 30, 40 years hence, what will they say? They will talk about the fact that he's doing deals. They will talk about the fact that he's marketing India. They will talk about the fact that he's making India, potential Indian capability, attractive. Why does Elon Musk have to say? Some idiots are saying, oh, Elon Musk had to say this for PR. Yes. Let's imagine he has said it for PR. Did we ever get this kind of PR before? Didn't Americans
Exactly.
have businesses in India before? Didn't we have GE before? Didn't we have Boeing before? Didn't we have Procter and Gamble before? But did their CEOs talk like this? No. Did thinkers in America talk like this? No. You will have people who will write. So 75 people have written. So what? Big deal. Ilhan Omar has written. Big deal. Don't even give these people any bow. Who cares
No,
about
I'm
Ilhan?
interested in her. What do you think of the people that the Prime Minister's team has met for him to have FaceTime with?
I think it's
What do you
excellent.
think that says? What do you think
See,
that says? Because
I,
there's
I do
yeah.
I do 6 trips to the US every year. I need
Mhm.
a cross section of people. If you remember the last time I had dinner with Radhika Jones, who's the editor in chief of Vanity Fair. These are people who you need to meet because they influence the narrative. What is let me now
Mm,
be clinical from a marketing point of view. What is it that you need to do? You need to change the narrative on India from, oh, India, the poor country, India, the country of snake charmers, to the India of potential, of geopolitical might, and of economic clout. That's the transition you've got to do in brand positioning terms. Exactly what Modi is doing. Today, when Modi leads from a Richard Gere to whoever else to in yoga at the United Nations, what are you doing? People are again not able to understand. He is not planting the Narendra Modi knows yoga flag. He is planting India is yoga, yoga is India.
correct.
That's the flag he's
Yes.
planting. People don't understand that. People also don't understand when he's having that dinner in the White House, and when Biden says, "Oh, I'm running out of tickets. Everyone wants a ticket." It means India is the flavor of the month. Were we ever the flavor of the month? Was there ever
Mm,
a bheed dhamaka to come to any state dinner?
mm,
Was any president or prime minister who was fated there? And it is these same people who are talking about Narendra Modi when Rahul Gandhi tore up an ordinance as Manmohan Singh was literally walking to the Oval Office. Was that respectful of your prime minister? No. And please, let's stop comparing. Oh, that Manmohan Singh got this deal done and someone got this deal done. We are not talking about deals. We are talking about brand India's positioning. We're talking about the arrival of brand India on the global stage. When the world's most powerful nation and the world's most impactful economy stands up and takes notice, we should celebrate without arrogance.
mm,
We should feel
mm.
proud without being, as I said, arrogant. We should be talking about what we've achieved. We should celebrate that achievement. हमारी ये फितरत है कि जो अच्छा हो उसको कूड़े में डालो. Why? I've not understood what's going on. One of the people on this thing commented about pessimism. This is not pessimism. This is bitterness laced with cynicism. It's almost as if there is a pernicious desire among some Indians who want India to fail. But India will not fail.
Mm.
India is like the bumblebee. Aerodynamically, the bumblebee is not supposed to fly, but the bumblebee doesn't know that it flies happily. It's time for India to fly happily. It's time
Mm.
for India to stand up and be counted. It's time for all of us to celebrate our fellow Indians, both in India and in the diaspora, who have brought us to this point. That's the
Mm.
celebration. It's not a celebration of Narendra Damodar Das Modi. It's a celebration of every Indian who has contributed to this fantastic journey, and the journey has only begun.
Yeah. Sreemoy, what is China thinking right now? I mean, they're watching very closely. So, what are the calculations, do you think? What are the signs that they're looking at to see if the India-US relationship will pivot in a certain direction?
I can tell you that they are not happy. They have already
Mm.
blocked one joint bid by the Americans and the Indians to designate a UN terrorist. They are not happy at all. In fact, if anything, China fears, and China doesn't see India as its competitor yet. There's actually a mismatch between how India sees China and how China sees India. India sees China as its primary adversary, the most powerful enemy that it has on the border. But China doesn't see India that way. For the Chinese, India is more of an irritant which might become powerful one day, might pose problems at one point of time, but that time has not yet become. But if there's one thing China fears about India, is India getting closer to the United States, because then India gets the kind of heft which China fears, because India already has a lot of geographical advantage because it's a maritime power. It's got its beaches, it's got its coasts all along the way. That's something
Yeah,
which China doesn't have. It's a landlocked country, yes. So China
correct.
is scared of that. China is scared of that, but it fears the strategic closeness. So if you look closely at the Chinese media, when Modi has gone to the United States, you'll find that they're making snarky comments. They are coming out with statements like, "Oh, it doesn't really matter if Modi goes to the US. It won't make a material difference for India's fortunes. What will make a difference for India is a reformation which Modi can carry out inside this country." As if we didn't know that. It's just the Chinese way of expressing displeasure. So yeah, it's been interesting to see how China is reacting. I just want to add one thing to what Suhel has been saying about Congress putting up Nehru pictures. I think there is one more motivation behind that. I think that the current Congress party is led by midges and dwarfs. It doesn't have one big leader. So they have to
Mm.
go into the history and pull back old Nehru from his resting place and prop him up in his yoga pose, just to show that, look, you are talking about Modi, we also have Nehru. So they complain about the BJP talking about Nehru all the time, and when the time comes, they pull up Nehru from his resting place and put him up in social media. So that's the paucity of Congress's. I mean, right now
Leadership.
they're yeah, they are absolutely. This is an admission of Congress party that they don't have a leader of the stature of Narendra Modi in their ranks, which is why they had to take recourse to Nehru. So I think
But
that's where the Nehru pictures are coming from.
as I said, it is only the beginning of a new journey.
Yeah, quite so.
It's very Robert Frost like. Two divergent paths in the woods, and I took the one less traveled. Here's what I would give as free advice for the government. We need to buckle up on soft power. And by soft power, I don't mean NATO, and Bollywood. I mean soft power in every which way. Today, yoga is a derivative of that soft power. We need to augment soft power and tell the world about our literary heritage, about our cultural heritage, without only talking about Bollywood and Bollywood and Bollywood. Number two, we need to revamp, reorganize, recalibrate the Nehru centers. I'm saying don't even call them the Nehru centers anymore. Call them the India Cultural Center. Does China have a Mao Center for culture? No. We're the only jokers who have Nehru Center. Those Nehru centers are nothing but cheap wine and even
No, no,
cheaper.
there's no. They name different things. Suhel, they name different things. The Nehru Centers in
I'm talking
London.
about the Nehru Center in
In
London
London,
and the
it's
Nehru
the
Center in
premier
Mumbai.
center,
Yeah,
but
but
all the
I'm saying
centers have
you need
different, like
standardization,
Vivekananda.
but you need standardization and branding. In all of America, we don't have one India Cultural Center, which is the
Right.
repository. All look at the irony. We have an Asia
Mm.
society, we don't have an India society building. And yet we have this diaspora, all these Johnny's, Madison Garden, ye wo, all that nonsense. Bhai, paisa kharch karke ek India society create karo. So you need to augment soft power. Number two, when this visit is played back in India, the biggest mistake the government will make is if it allows the BJP to hijack it as a party agenda. They will, but it should be more a national agenda that has been accomplished rather than a party agenda. Finally, in our outreach to people who the Prime Minister has met, that outreach must continue. The problem is that these meetings are organized by MEA officials. When the MEA joker retires, then even the relationship goes. It is time for the establishment to now maintain that relationship. So let's say I've met Elon Musk. There must be a letter of gratitude or thanks from Prime Minister Modi. It does amazing things in terms of strengthening, creating, and crafting a relationship. These
Yeah,
are
I
my
love Musk. I love Musk's response to Jack. It was an oblique response, but it was definitely aimed at Jack, wherein he just said that American laws cannot be applied to all of Earth. Loved it,
yeah.
because Jack is like such a hypocrite. All of us are shadow banned, but and this it's still being discovered. Musk is still digging into
On
all these
that note,
algorithms and
I'm
everything.
very busy this evening. I've got other channels as well. So I
We're
must
also done. Thank you so
must
much,
beg
Suhel ji,
you.
for joining
Lovely
us.
meeting you,
Thank
Sreemoy.
you, Sreemoy. And thank you, our viewers, for joining us on
Thank
this
you, viewers.
special.
So kind of you.
And it's really kind of you to support us and to be here. Do like this video so that it goes out to more people. Do also subscribe to the channel. And we shall see you back soon again. Thank you, everybody, and bye for now. Thanks, Sreemoy.